First of all, thank you for being here. My name is Barbara Trebitsch. I'm the head of the fashion school in Domus Academy. Mostly I'm a fashion designer, actually, that was taken into the educational path. And we work upon fashion in a very practical way in terms of forming real practitioners, no matter if they work in the domain of business or in the domain of design. And we actually work with a faculty that is not a real faculty, but we work only with professionals and companies such as Alessandro Dell'Acqua, Ermenegildo Zegna, Swarovski, Tozzi, and so on. The reason why we work this way is because we do not believe having master's courses in a fixed faculty, but we want to nourish the students, but ourselves as well, actually, with the updated informations about the fashion field because we need to form people that hopefully will make statements in their business. I'm also a member of different institutional membership from schools in South America, in Italy, and abroad. And the funny thing is that recently I was involved as a selection member for the casting of Project Runway Italy, which is a real funny thing because you see everything that you could not even imagine, and that was a kind of real interesting experience. What are we going to talk about today? And please interrupt me just in case you have any questions, because I would like this not to be a formal speech, but a conversation with you. I titled this presentation, The Fashion Matrix, a Contemporary Approach to Fashion Design, which sounds a little bit obnoxious. But at the end of the day, the idea is to talk about what's going on today in the fashion field and how a fashion designer should place himself into this changing world. The images you are seeing are mostly from our students. And let's talk about fashion as global phenomena and the challenge that it means. I always use this quote from Anatole France, the French writer, because I think it really states what fashion is or what fashion should be. And forgive me if I will read it. If in the tones of work that will be published 100 years after my death, I was given the chance to choose one book, you know which one I would select? In this library of the future, I would not choose a novel, no, not an history book. Simply, my friend, I would take a fashion magazine to understand what women will wear 1 century after my death. And those clothes would give me more information about humanity in the future than all the philosophers, the writers, the preachers, and the scientists together. So, one of the first things we tell to our students as long as they arrive to school is fashion is not about clothing or bags or accessories or jewelry. Fashion is about social. Fashion is the portrait of something that is happening, or better, something that is coming to happen. Obviously, according to that, we needed to synthesize the fact that in the last 20 years, fashion has gone through an irreversible change. As Antonio Mancinelli was always saying that he is old, but we are the same age, Antonio, I'm sorry. I was living the wonderful 80s where fashion was so easy for a fashion designer, meaning that you went to a fair, you saw that the trends area was showing you some geographical area of reference or an historical period, and then you were inspired, you did your collection, and that's it. It was really, really easy. Obviously, this is not anymore, luckily I would say, because there is a natural selection of designers according to that, and the globalization has played a role onto that. It is about individual sensitivity. How individual sensitivity for a designer is expressed. Again, quotes, I'm sorry, but when I find some people that have said very clever things, instead of trying to put them in a different way, I prefer to quote them. And Jean Baudrillard, that is a very important writer on social phenomena, said that fashion states simultaneously and clearly the myth of mutation. Simultaneity, synchronicity, the contraction of space and time are nowadays more relevant than any pretended trend like they were existing in 20 years ago. Carl Jung said that it's enough to know that no ideas or essential concession lack historical roots. Finally, they are all founded on primordial archetypical forms whose expressive nature goes back to an era when conscience was not thinking, yet it perceived. Obviously, I'm facing the problem in a large way, but what is really relevant is the fact that designers should have a double way of thinking, one which is instinctive perception and another one, and it's related to talent, and another one that is related to rational conscience. No trends trend. Trends, as I was saying, do not exist anymore. Personally, in our school, we do not believe in cahiers de tendance or these kind of things because we believe that it's the designer that should be able to make statements about the future. And usually these books are more used by companies that need to have some sort of reassurance on what they're doing. That means not being designers, but being fashion followers. In a system in which trends are not absolute any longer, the designer must put himself at the core of the situation, meaning that it will be all about these three I: identity, inspiration, and innovation. The designer has to create his own world of references and his own identity. Antonio Ieri in his speech was talking a lot about the DNA of the brands. And to me, designer and brands are obviously the same thing, meaning that a designer should be the brand of himself and should convey a word of reference. Let's say, when you buy a pair of Prada shoes, are you interested only in the aesthetic of Prada, or you are in love with the message that the brand is conveying? I think that most of us, obviously, when we make such a choice, we select a piece because we love it on an aesthetical value. But at the same time, we recognize ourselves somehow in what the brand is conveying. Let's say, putting it in very banal terms, that Prada is very conceptual, high-end, recognized all over the world to be a company that is working in deep relationship with contemporary art, bringing the new social changes into fashion. So, when I choose a Prada shoe, I'm not buying simply a pair of shoes, but I'm buying the word of reference they're representing. And sometimes, and I'm sure this happens to all of us in this room, even though there is a piece from a company that we could like, but we do not really like the company itself, the brand identity itself, sometimes we give up and we don't buy that piece. And this is really relevant to be taken into consideration, especially nowadays with the globalization. Which is the role of the designer? To create ideas in this field implies the creation of a concrete methodological approach, and the role of designers needs to be more and more related to different areas. There is another quote, I'm sorry, but I like a lot of quotes, as you can see, from Hussein Chalayan, which is, I would say, an artist, not only a designer, but he knows how to be a designer as well, because it would be too easy to play the role of the artist when you don't know how to make clothes. In his case, he can do both things very well. And he said that at the time, I liked the idea that you could look at a garment and tell that it had gone through something or might be the result of an action. This is another very, very important aspect, in my opinion. The designer of the future must be able to suggest a new world. And this is the sense we need to give to our work, to integrate processes in a multidisciplinary approach. The definition of inspiration, multi-references, and in-depth research, meaning having a cultural background. It's not only about designing clothes or bags or jewelry or whatever. The definition of materials, the creation of the materials themselves, especially when it comes to small brands, it's very important to be able to manipulate the materials in order to create a difference, especially nowadays. Also according to the fact that in the industry system, there are minimum quantity that you can achieve, buy from main brands that are too high sometimes for a startup or for a small collection. In order to be different, in order to create a statement, most designers, when it comes to the first years of collection, work a lot upon manipulation. Obviously, the definition of volumes, shapes, and details, the definition of collection, construction, and the defined needed items, because once more, when I was starting this job, you went to a fashion show, and collections were incredibly huge. I mean, you could have like 100 outfits on a catwalk, and they could last like half an hour. Nowadays, even the huge brands are making much tiny collection, like 40 outfits, no more. But the problem is that they're working on many collections a year. And this is another problem. There was an interesting article that came out a few years ago, and it was an interview to Azedina Raya. But at the same time, it's an opportunity because you can really do what you think. The real thing that happens in this field is that, as I was telling you before about unconsciousness, real designers, real talented people that are working in this field are like shakers that also instinctively are taking information from what happens outside and melting in their own way and bring them up. This is why, and sometimes it happens in the field because it's weird. I mean, I'm dealing with a lot of designers in my job, and friends and people that are working with the school. And talking with them, at the end of the day, I discovered that even very different people, from Antonio Berardi to Costume Nacional or Alessandro, when they talk about what they're going to do for the next season, they are taking somehow certain aspect of social life, or yes, I would say social life, really, because it's about social studies, what we're talking about today. And obviously, they're transmitting in different ways. Obviously, there are macro trends. The word is not correct anymore, I think. There is a problem of naming, because in our field, trends were just the book and the mood boards. This is not anymore. It's more about a conceptual aspect. So according to this, yes, there are trends, there are instinctive, and this is why I was talking about cultural background. According to the color chart or to the silhouette, this is gone away. And also, if you look at the history, the recent history of the most outstanding designers, such as Alexander McQueen, he was not doing what the rest of the world was doing. This is why he made a statement. This is why he created his own strong identity on which the brand is still living upon. So this is a kind of tricky question, but I think that it was very useful that you did it, not only because I was stuck here without the video, but also because it was very interesting to go more in depth into what I said. Thank you so much. So then obviously there is the definition of the collection, the construction, the needed items, as I was saying, and the price coherent. Sometimes, especially young designers, tend to think, oh God, I've used the most beautiful thing, a silk ever. I'm stitching everything by ends, so it will cost like millions, like a Louis Vuitton dress. No way. You have to place your product on the market, because nowadays, you like it or not, people, as I was saying before, are not buying garments, but first they are buying brands. So if you're a young designer that is starting your own collection, you cannot come out in your first season with the same prices as high-end luxury brands, because you will not sell a piece unless you have a lot of relatives in a very important entourage that will wear them for you, but this is not for everybody. Obviously, the building of the final image, the styling. Nowadays, stylists are becoming even more relevant, more important than designers. And very important designers are working a lot with very important stylists for the catwalks, for the catalogs, for whatever, because sometimes they need to get some distance from what they have done in order to create a different look that could comply better also the business. The press and advertising image, the distribution, both physical and online, because nowadays we have to think also about that. and the shop image in case you have a shop or a corner. Otherwise, obviously, this is not manageable. Fashion vision. Fashion vision is the most important aspect, and it is related to the individual sensitivity of the designer. It is not such an intangible aspect, but on the contrary, it's a constant training to be driven by brands and designers in order to be competitive and innovative. Never be happy with what you do. This is the secret at the end of the day. It's a stupid secret, but it is. Meaning that when you see a designer after the show and you go in the backstage to congratulate, they're usually saying, that was great, your collection was fantastic, it was a real statement, I loved it. So, yes, but you know what, at the end of the day, it could have been better, I could have changed this and this and this. This means to have a brain approach that is in constant evolution. How can we make a forward statement? I mean, we are in fashion forward, and this name is not a case. Fashion forward means that fashion is going forward, is looking forward, and designers should be the people that are able to look forward more than other people. So to be happy with what you've done, obviously, I mean, I'm not so bad to say that you should be unhappy for every collection you design, but to go on a constant improvement is really relevant. Never be satisfied. Another point, look at other designers' work, but without being inspired. This is one of the most difficult things ever. Because all of us, we have our favorite designers, our favorite brands, our favorite collections. And one thing that a real designer should do is know everything that is on earth about fashion, but then forget it. Because otherwise there is a high risk of being a fashion follower, a copycat. And copycats is something that is not forgivable in this field. Obviously, look at its self-characteristic in order to enhance them. One thing that, for instance, we train in the school, obviously all the fashion students are coming and they want to work for Prada, for Versace, and so on, and we do. But the point is that fashion is not only luxury. Fashion is done, and we've seen a beautiful presentation yesterday during the lunch from Ben & Company about the segments of fashion. Fashion is also premium brands. Fashion is also denim. Fashion is also a lot of brands. We have also to understand as designer where we are strong, where we want to place our product. Perhaps I'm not so good in high-end products, luxury products or high-end brand products, but I'm the best designer ever for denim. So we need also to be very honest with ourselves and try different aspects in order to understand where we are placing our products in this kind of chain. And obviously, I know it's redundant, but look at constant social and global changes in order to match the future. But is it all enough? Shouldn't we better understand the present and the future in order to create innovation? I mean, there are things that are happening now. And we're in a moment of revolution in the fashion field. The web, social networking, technology are creating new needs. There is a new approach to luxury and a new thinking about fashion. It's all about creativity. To give recipes like I've done right now could be a starting point, but it's not enough anymore. Marshall McLuhan, that I guess everybody knows in this room, said that in the electronic age, we wear all mankind as our skin. One problem that I usually face with nowadays students is about the web. I will clarify this aspect. I love the web. I'm constantly connected. I'm an old chick, but I'm into that. But the problem is that my generation was raised up with no web, no internet. And when we had to make a research, we had to struggle to go to public libraries to get information. If we didn't go to the shows, we didn't have any chance to see the show in real time, like young students can do that now. if we needed to make real researches, we really had problems. So we gave a value to the research aspects that are really important, and we were going in depth into every aspect of it, because it was tiring. That's it. Nowadays, you connect yourself, and I see that students many times are doing that, which is good. I do the same, but they stay on the surface of it. They surf the net. They don't go in depth into the information enough. And this is a big risk because it means that the web, that is the greater opportunity of this time, could become a danger in terms of processing information. And there is this beautiful quote from Mitchell Kapor that is, getting information off the internet is like taking a drink from a fire hydrant, meaning that we are submerged by information and we don't even memorize all the information we get. So we have to use the web and not be used by the net in a proper way in order to exploit it properly. Derek Decker-Cove, which is a thinker, he was working with Marshall McLuhan in Canada and is now one of our visiting professors, said that our identity is distributed in the global network out of our control. In the digital unconsciousness, all information about you on the web you are not aware of has a bigger influence on you and your life than your parents. Try to think at yourself. How much are you connected? I mean, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, mail. Mail young people are not using them so much. It's like fax for them. I contact people more through Facebook when it comes to people aged less than 30. But we give a lot of information about ourselves. And this information is staying there for the rest of our life. And we tend to give for granted all the information we get because they're so easy. We have an unfiltered relation with the world. I see a move towards a global nervous system in a sensibility that is changing, which are the strengths and weaknesses of such a situation. Transparency toward the implosion of cultures, peer networking toward identity modification. Yesterday, I was reading that was said that nowadays is not the moment anymore, also in the fashion industry, of solo player. It's a moment in which you have to put together a lot of different combinations, a lot of different professionality, and not the one-man player, the star that is doing everything by himself, being in the front stage. I think that this is related also to the use we do of this kind of tools. Another point that is very relevant, and this is my direct experience with people coming from all over the world, so it's not related to Italy or to Europe, but really globally, when I work with students that are very good people, I mean in terms of cultural background, identity, and whatever, still we have a kind of problem. Because most of the designers nowadays tend to think bidimensionally. And you will say, it's a paradox. Yes, it is. Because when it comes to nowadays, the new technologies such as 3D or 3D printing are very popular. I mean, there are brands that have done a lot of success upon that. And it's a frontier that is really interesting to investigate. So I don't understand how the very first day of school, when they come in and they start work upon a collection and they see the first design, and I ask, how is the back? Maybe? Are you joking? Are you an illustrator or a designer? People that has grown up in front of a screen probably has a less relevant relationship with the material world. And this is important to connect because don't forget that designers are working with the eyes, with the brain, with the stomach, and with the ends, not only in terms of stitching, but in terms of tactile qualities. We just started in September the new intake, and I started the first project, and there was a student that came to me struggling, saying, I have done the research on materials. I say, okay, show me. It's on the web. Materials? On the web? Are you joking? I mean, and I'm not talking about people that are silly or people that do not know what they're doing. I'm talking about people with a bachelor, and I'm talking about people that is very talented. So the problem is not individual approach, but the problem probably that we have to take care of is to keep into consideration the material aspects of fashion, because this is, at the end of the day, what does at least the garment or the accessory. Then the web is something we need to use in terms of technologies in order to enhance our visibility, in order to enhance our statements, in order not to pass through the magazines, in order to get a niche at least followers. But it has to be a tool that we use and not the contrary. And this is a kind of a problem that not only in my school, but generally, when I talk with other colleagues from all over the world, is something we are facing. So please, please, mix and match the informations. Don't be selective only through the easy path, but take also sometimes the most difficult path, because that is the one that probably will lead you somewhere. Then, luxury. Antonio yesterday explained very well the approach to luxury nowadays. It's not about having paillettes and Swarovski all over a garment, because this can be done in China for a very cheap amount of money. Luxury is about the time you convey to create a real outstanding product. And I brought here an example of Giovanni Bonotto, which is also a friend, that is a very interesting case history for that. Giovanni owns a very peculiar company. It's a textile company in Vicenza, which is in the northeast of Italy, near Venice. That is also where Renzo Rosso, Ducati, I mean, in 1 kilometer, you have a lot of high-end companies in that area. And is a rare case of an Italian brand that was inherited by the sons that, instead of destroying it, like sometimes happened, were enhancing it. Giovanni has a degree in semiology, but he grew up into the textile factory. And he decided somehow not only to expand the factory, but to create a sort of internal kitchen where to create amazing stuff. He works with everybody, works since many years with Armani, but also with Dries Van Noten, with Caro Christian Poel, and with Zara, because, I mean, he needs to sell, and he's doing everything that is requested by the market. But when it comes to his high-end production, he works a lot upon research. And one thing that he did, he went to Japan to buy mechanical looms that are having only 1 meter, 10 centimeters wideness, in order to create fabrics that you cannot create anymore with electronic machines. Obviously, these are not the fabrication he's selling to Zara. He's doing that for Caro Christian or for Animal Master, this kind of designers, or this Van Noten. But what is really interesting is that this is artisan craftsmanship. And he was explaining me that when it comes to these looms, it can have such a strength into the way that the yarn is connected that you cannot reproduce it any way, in another way. He also went to Bulgaria because he wanted to make black wool, but he didn't want to dye it. So he went to buy black sheeps. And when he said that when he arrived in Bulgaria, where they didn't care about black sheep because they didn't give a good milk such as the others, so for them were almost something. We use in Italy to say a black sheep in a family is someone that you don't want in the family. And he bought them, and he started to produce very tiny quantity of natural black wool from the black sheep. So he's a crazy guy, and he created these statements about the slow factory. If you go in his factory, it's an amazing story, because his father was one of the most important collectionists of Fluxus art in the 60s. The factory is all biological architecture. It's very relaxed. Everybody works a lot, but really with an happy attitude, because it says that, when people are happy, all artisans working here, also the workers, whatever, they have to be happy to create good fabrics, because otherwise they will not come out properly, which is a kind of innovative thinking, especially in this timing. And he has a piece of art, of contemporary arts, spread all around the company. It's a place where you really want to stay. It's not the classical company. And this is luxury, but it is a clever luxury. Because what is selling at the end of the day is not just a beautiful fabric you will not find to any other company, which is already a luxury sign, but is something that is really related to a new way of perceiving things. And is working a lot on the internet, is making a lot of research on the net, is having a lot of exposure on the web. So what are we talking about when it comes back to the real connection between the web and luxury and all these kind of things? Just to sum up, what I wanted to say is that we are living, I'm sure about that, in a moment of incredible change. I think in 5 years, everything will be rehearsed in the fashion field. The timing of the collections, the kind of collections, the names that will arise, that will be from all over the world. And this is already happening thanks to the web. And we do not have to think at fashion being stuck in the old models, meaning fashion weeks, meaning how many collections per year I should do, meaning all the economical system. Because especially when it comes to the sellout on the web, everything is changing. The relationship of the client is changing with the goods themselves. It's not only about buying a product. It's not only, as I was saying, about selecting a brand because we recognize somehow ourselves into the brand identity, but it's also about having a vision about what we want to have and the way we want to have it. You know why Zara is so successful? It's not only about low prices. It's because it's like going to the supermarket. Even though you cannot afford high-end prices, you can go there and for a cheap amount of money, you can get something nice and funny. And you are living in experience, searching for things, having the chance of getting them, not just looking at them from another point of view. Obviously, what Antonio was saying yesterday is more than correct. Nowadays, people are more selective to select good items, spending a little bit more, because we do not need to have 10 T-shirts of the same kind in our room, but we need better to have goods that we really like and that we bring on with ourselves more along. But at the same time, what is true is that we need experience. The crisis of the stores nowadays is not about the goods that are not terrible anymore. It's more about the fact that if I go to a store of a high-end luxury brand and I know that I will see the same stuff for the next 6 months, I'm not interested because I'm not going to buy it today because, okay, I'll have a look to other places and see something else unless I have already chosen it. But what changes is that I can go around, I can browse with my friends, I can go to the boutique, I can see a lot of things that I like or I don't like, and then I will go on the web, probably to buy to a lower price, the same stuff that I already tried on or that I did like. Also, we have to consider that in the next future, and it's coming pretty quickly, I would say, we will have touch screens where we will have the chance to have the feeling of the touch of the material. And that a lot of brands, since a long time, were already exploring these virtual cabins where to try on goods. They're putting that on the net, so that probably we will have a sort of avatar on the web that will try out things for us to see if they will fit us or not. And this will be a kind of social game as well. How many amongst you, too many amongst you, happened that you went to do shopping, but you were alone, and you were not sure about the fitting of your garment, and you were taking a picture of yourself, sending an MMS to a friend to see, do you like it? Should I take it? Didn't it happen to anybody here? I mean, in Italy it happens pretty often, especially with youngsters. Try to imagine to have this kind of game on the web. I mean, can you understand how things are totally changing? And I think that the younger generations now, on one side, have some sort of problem, meaning that nowadays is not the time like in the end of the 70s when companies like Armani were based, in which you started with a little bit of money, you didn't need PR, you didn't need anything, and then you had success because someone discovered you. That time is over. But on the other hand, there are other tools. So we have to switch our way of thinking at fashion in order to create not only new lines, new identity, but a new system. Thank you. I don't know if I have enough time, but just to close up, thank you. I brought a very small video that was done this year in January, and it's a small workshop. It's not as evolved as the final project that the students are doing at the end of the year, but it's interesting because it shows a little bit the way they approach the project as a whole. And I would like to close with that. So if you can please put the video on. Thank you. Thank you. I don't know if you have any questions.
I understand your point about the revolution where like 2 seasons or this fashion weeks are becoming less and less of an importance. And then where you have now a new system of the Zara system, where it's like every few weeks you have new products on the floor. But this is for a big company like Zara that can afford to do that. What about small companies?
Yes, I'm telling exactly the contrary, meaning that this is going to come somehow at the end in terms of creativity, but it's a request of the public. Obviously, small companies cannot afford to do that, but there are many, many formulas to be able to match it. Just to make an example, I believe that in this region there are a lot of young designers that are working on their own atelier, working on up-to-measure garments by very high end. And obviously, they're somehow continuously creating. So try to imagine instead, I'm just making an example. In this case, instead of trying to have a collection twice a year or 4 times or 6 times a year in order to nourish continuously the store, try to imagine that you base your collection thinking also in an unseasonal way, sharing more capsule collection during the year, which is not about making hundreds of items, but it's about making small quantities, small designs, and to be very selective upon what you want to convey. Because at that point, it's something that could be manageable. Also, you have to consider that this kind of system where you have to have goods continuously set up on the stores is a system that is about one owns store. When it comes to young designers, you don't need to nourish it every 2 weeks. But don't say that big company cannot afford that, because nowadays big companies such as Prada, for instance, are doing a similar approach to Zara. They're working on that. And the other interesting things when it comes to fashion, and it came to my mind just because we were mentioning Prada, is that also all the professions around the designers are changing according to that. Just to make an example, we had a stratification of professions in the fashion field until a few years ago. There was the brand manager, the store manager, the visual merchandiser, the fashion stylist, the fashion designer, the product manager, and also when it comes to product manager, you talk with different companies, and the product manager is a totally different job from one company to another. But now what is happening in companies is that they are also trying to melt up a lot the different skills in one person. For instance, to have a visual merchandiser that is also the store manager, meaning being able to have a sensibility, an aesthetic quality and aesthetic skills in order to manage the store, in order to create at least the sensation of having a constant change in the store to attire people, because the stores are like windows, are like advertisement. I mean, if you go to Via Monte Napoleone, you don't find, unless it's, I don't know, Christmas or holidays and there are a lot of tourists, Gucci store or a Prada store crowded of people dying for buying stuff. But you find a lot of people looking at the windows, going and browsing, not necessarily buying at in that point. But coming back to what I was saying, they're melting this kind of qualities. That means that also designers nowadays, they have to be aware of the business factor as well, because it's not the time. Otherwise, you would be artists, which is another job. Beautiful. When it comes to design, you have to melt different abilities and to think to your own formula according to your tools. Sometimes from restrictions, real innovation is coming. I mean, when Italian fashion was born, Italian in the middle of the 70s was in such an debt crisis. I mean, we didn't have fuel, we didn't have money, problem with the government, but that we still have anyway. You know, we like to be somehow the same stuff all the time. So it was not the best moment to create an industry. But at the end of the day, it raised up into the constraints. So I think that is also a psychological approach we have to state somehow. Don't stuck yourself with the idea that the system works like this, and this. So if I don't fit it, I will never be able to start because I don't have the money, I don't have the connections, I don't have... Nowadays, the strength of the web, which I am against in terms of research sometimes, as you can see, but is an incredible tool to create followers, to create redundancy upon your idea. What counts is the idea, is not being followers. People of my age that has lived a pretty long season in this field, I mean, I'm in the field since the 87, so I've seen many things, are difficult to convince in terms of innovation. And I think that it's not only about making nice stuff. The world is full of people able nowadays to make nice stuff. You don't need to come to any fashion school. You go on the web and you see a tutorial how to stitch a skirt, and you learn how to stitch a skirt. And if you have some good taste, you can do nice stuff. It's not about that. It's about creating a business model. Designers should be able not only to create an identity, but to create a way to convey. There are designers that, for instance, are selling only online. And they have pop-up stores, like 4 times a year, in different places, where they connect through Facebook with potential buyers, where they sell the goods and people can go and try up the goods. And this is what's happening now. Try to imagine in the future. I have my small activity in that sense, and I was struggling because in the 80s, usually when you had a collection in Italy, what happened was that you called an agent. The agent with the car and the rack with all the garments went all the way through the country to sell to different stores. The agents have disappeared. Now we have showrooms. Try to imagine, to enter in a showroom, even though the showroom owner really likes your style, you have to pay a lot of money without even knowing if you will sell something or not, because you have to rent somehow a space there and the people that will sell the goods for you. And usually showrooms with young designers tend to be pretty difficult because they are afraid that then they will not be able to give the goods in time, or that the goods will not be as the prototyping, all this kind of problem that when something is new, you're afraid of. I think that this system is somehow stuck. Also because showrooms are linked to the fashion weeks. Try to imagine a buyer that is traveling. Let's talk about the main fashion weeks all over the world that will change also this kind of characteristic, but this is another speech. Try to imagine a buyer that is going to London, to New York, to Milan, and to Paris. And he goes to the shows, goes to the showrooms to select the goods, then he goes back to his own country, and then he has to make a selection and cancel some orders and confirm others, and trade on the prices and so on. It's a mess. This is the system now. Probably, especially when it comes to new brands, it's not only about thinking of a new brand in terms of style, but it's about thinking a new brand as a whole, in conceptual terms. And now, and in the next future, you will have all the tools to do that. I'm telling you what is happening now. It's not necessarily what will happen tomorrow. How many people do you think will go to stores to buy in the future? I don't think so many. I love to go shopping. It's my religion, and my husband ate that. When I go to the States, my brother-in-law lives nearby one of the bigger malls of the United States. They leave me at 9 in the morning, and they come to pick me up the other way out at 9 in the evening, and they come without even forgetting also to drink the whole day, like this. But still, I am part of a world that is disappearing. I'm not the future. You are the future. And probably you should think of yourself also as consumers and not only as designers or as fashion people, to think what is not there, what you want to achieve, what you want to get. I don't know if I answered your questions. Bye. Okay, thank you so much.